do you want to introduce Mari just for a second and then we can start?
Hi, sorry. I'm on two devices because I'm gonna have to run to the car and pick up my kids, but I'll listen. So I'm gonna keep my computer on here and also listen on my phone. But I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I'm also a personal support counselor at Maui College, and work, I guess, closely with DVAC or domestic violence in the community, involved with some nonprofit work, Meet in Hope, which also works towards bringing prevention toward to help women and children rescued from sex trafficking in the Philippines and in Hawaii. So I'm very interested and happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mari. And Amy, this is kind of interesting, but I've never really met Mari in person since COVID. She is my colleague. I've seen her name on numerous emails from our chancellor. So this has brought us a little closer of having this domestic violence. And I really want to thank Mizuto Sensei for bringing this topic to light, because while we don't talk about it a lot, it has impacted Hawaii equally in these last 2 years. So also I see Li Ping Liu, who's here. She's an instructor, teaches tourism hospitality, but she is also the International Student Club advisor. So thank you for coming, Li Ping. If you would like to say something, Li Ping, please do so now.
Yes, this is an exciting week for all the University of Hawaii students and the faculty. We just completed a study abroad presentation, and Stephanie, thank you for all you do to lead the UHMC international exchange and regional development, those endeavor. Pleased to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Li Ping. Thank you. So we'll turn it back to you. I don't see anybody else from my campus, so Mizuto Sensei, onegai shimasu.
And can I just say, sorry, before we start, one last thing is thank you very much for joining us, Li Ping Liu and also Mari. And it's really good to have professionals in the same fields participating today. When I took students a few years back, we had one student who from Japan, while she was in Maui, her boyfriend here in Japan committed suicide. And it's a really hard week for her, whether she should go home or stay, and one of the counselors there was able to talk to her, and I was able to sit in and translate. And it was a real eye-opening, because all of us, we come to the tropical paradise of Hawaii and everything's beautiful and that type of thing. And in the process of talking to him, I was able to learn about how many problems there are as well, which is normal for any society. But it's really important for us to be able to understand Hawaii better, is to know more about it. And the fact that we can have professionals on both sides of the ocean be able to hear and talk to each other, I'm really happy. And I hope that these are the kind of connections that we make that can lead to more future programs and study programs and students going abroad to study each other's, those type of things. So I'm really happy that you're able to participate today. With that in mind, I'm going to pass the baton over to Mizuto Sensei. If you could please go ahead and begin. The original plan was to go until about 10:40, but some of my students, I told them last night and they were excited, but it's 9 a.m. so maybe they're not awake. I don't know, they might show up later. But also the second class starts at 10:30. It starts at 10:30. So we're figuring instead of taking a 10-minute break in the middle, we'll just go straight through and finish by 10:30. It seems like it'd probably be easier to do. So Professor Mizuto's speech is going to be about 30 minutes long, and then we'll have a little bit of Q&A, and then we'll be finished. So while you are listening, if you can put some comments or some thoughts or some questions into chat, and or after we're done, if you can plan to ask a few questions or make some observations, that would be great. We want this to be as interactive as possible. So with that, I pass the baton to Mizuto Sensei. Onegai shimasu.
Okay, thank you. And hello, everybody again. And my name is Masu Mizuto. I'm a professor of forensic social work at the Yamaguchi Prefecture University. My research interests mainly around offenders with disability, like intellectual disabilities or the developmental disabilities. Prior to taking up a position at the university here, I worked for the Disability Service Organization in Osaka in Japan for a couple of years as a manager. And prior to that, I was in Australia, in Melbourne for 11, 12 years. I was working for Department of Human Services there in the Disability Services Division. And while I was working there, I was in the case management position and the project management position, and I was doing a work in relation to the offenders with disabilities, particularly in a community-based care. So that's my background. I was trained in social work in Australia, and then I did my PhD in law, doing a criminal justice policy here. Today, I would like to talk about the domestic violence during the COVID-19 pandemic in Japan, and I prepared a bit of slides, so I'd like to share the screen with you guys. I'm just doing this. Just a sec. Okay, can you see the slides? Yeah, and also reception is okay, like my reception. Yeah,
Perfect, perfect.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So I'll start now. Okay, I'll talk about domestic violence, and I sometimes use the term family violence as well, because I'm talking about the other forms of violence as part of this talk. And this is not the like formal presentation or giving a paper at the conference. So please feel free, relaxed, and because of the topic, I really wouldn't feel like to say enjoy, but the yeah, feel relaxed and then ask any questions if you have one. Okay. I'd like to talk about three things today. The first of all, I wasn't too sure how much knowledge you guys actually have about Japan or the COVID-19 pandemic situation here in Japan. So I'll do a bit of background and then talk about a little bit about the declaration of state of emergency, which government applied last year and then this year, and then how that declaration affected people's life. And then the third topic would be COVID-19 pandemic and then domestic violence. I am working at the YPU here in Yamaguchi, but I'm commuting between Yamaguchi and Osaka on a weekly basis because my family lives in Osaka. So I can kind of share my experiences in rural area and the metropolitan area as well. Yamaguchi Prefecture has like 1.3 to 1.4 million people as a prefecture as a whole. Yamaguchi City has around a population of 200,000, I believe. Osaka has a population of close to 9 million. So you can actually see the you can sort of like imagine the difference between those two places. Just a background information, bit of geology and then population. So this is a map of Japan, obviously. Tokyo, the capital, is here. So it's up north, and Yamaguchi is here. And Osaka is a kind of in between Tokyo and Yamaguchi. And just give you some idea, it takes 1 hour by airplane from Yamaguchi to Tokyo. If you take a blue train, which is super express train services between Yamaguchi to Tokyo, it takes around 4 hours. to get there. Japan has a surface area. Japan's surface area is 377,000 square kilometer, and total population is 155 million, and it is the 11th largest population size in the world. But our population size is shrinking since 2008, and we have a very aging population as well. Population density is like 340 persons per square kilometer. So it's a lot of people in a small area, generally speaking. So that's Japan. And the big cities in Japan are like Tokyo, Nagoya, Osaka, Kobe, Fukuoka, which is down south, and Hokkaido up north. As you can imagine, the population density varies from area to area. So left-hand side photo is Tokyo peak hour traffic at the one of the biggest train stations there. Right-hand side photo is a rural area. Yamaguchi is more like this. As you can imagine, how the pandemic affected the people's day-to-day life vary as well. Because the people's, the frequency of contacts with other people varies from area to area. Just let me share some COVID-19 related numbers at the moment. And this is a current overview of the COVID-19 related situation in Japan. We have like 1.7 million confirmed cases and 18,000 deaths. Our vaccination rate is around 75% of the population. So it's sort of like, doing okay at the moment. And if I actually make a comparison with other countries, so these are the recent figures. So it's a new COVID-19 cases per 100,000 population from April to August this year. So it's the figures in 2021. Compared to other countries like Germany, France, US, the cases in Japan stay relatively low at the moment. And when we look at the rates of vaccination, it is on rise. It was a little bit slow at the beginning, but the vaccination rates are on rise in Japan as well. And as I mentioned earlier, the rates is around 75%. So these figures actually finished around August. So the rates actually looks quite low, like 40%, but it's actually increased since then. We have quite small number of new cases on a day-to-day basis at the moment. I just quickly checked the website this morning, and yesterday we have 15, infected people in Tokyo, and 13 in Osaka, 0 in Yamaguchi, and 154 across the country. So that's the figure from yesterday. And because these numbers has been low for quite some time, the government has started easing the restrictions such as shorter business hours, ban on alcohol servings in the restaurants, or holding mass gathering events like music concerts or the sporting events. So that's that's how it looks like now in Japan. And I would like to move on to the next topic, which is declaration of a state of emergency and people's life. So now I would like to talk about what actually happened last year and also the earlier part of this year in relation to the pandemic. We have a system called Declaration of a State of Emergency, which is based on Act. I quoted the name of the Act. It's really long, so I wouldn't read out. But it's actually based on this Act. The government has a power to declare a state of emergency in relation to the public health. And once government actually makes a declaration, the government, it's really, it's not vague. It's quite confusing, like compared to other countries like Australia or UK or maybe some states in US as well. The power attached to this declaration of state of emergency in Japan is quite weak and limited. So legally, the government actually can't order people to behave in a certain way or restrict their activities. What the government can do is the government actually can make a request to the people to follow the guideline issued by the government at the time. So it's quite weak in terms of legal power attached to it, but somehow people observe those requests. And this issue itself is quite interesting, like looking into the reasons behind the such a weak request by the government has been working quite well in Japan. But that's not the main concern of this talk, so I'll just move on. Under this declaration, we had 3 declarations made by the government during this pandemic to date. And I put the first one, which started from April and to the May last year. And I actually put that in bold character because I thought this first declaration affected people's life most. And I'll just give you a little bit of explanation for that. The first declaration affected the most because it covered a whole nation and everybody was affected in some ways. The second and third declarations covered only parts of Japan. Really, it's really covered the metropolitan areas like Tokyo, Osaka, Fukuoka, or Kyoto, or Sapporo. But the first one actually covered across the nation. And one of the big incidents for people at the time was that the prime minister at the time suddenly asked all primary and secondary schools, so which is elementary, junior high, and then high schools, to be closed in 1 week. And this statement was made on Thursday, and school closure started on Monday following week. So we had only like, and he made a statement in the early evening of Thursday. So school only actually had 1 day effectively to prepare for the school closure. And depends on the area of the Japan. Like my kids, my daughter was in the secondary school at the time, and my son was in elementary school at the time. Their school closed from the beginning of March to the beginning of June. So school suddenly closed, and then it actually continued to be closed for like 3 months. And in April 2020, more than 90% of all primary and secondary schools in Japan were closed. And another significant incident was the government's decision to make a payment of one-off cash allowance of 100,000 Japanese yen per person, which is equivalent to about 1,000 US dollars per person for all residents in Japan. And there was no age or income restrictions. And why this was significant? Because this payment caused concerns for domestic violence victims, because the system was designed to make a payment for all family members to one bank account nominated by one family member. And no access, so because of that, if domestic violence victims escaping from their houses, or if the person actually doesn't have access to the bank account, so they couldn't access to money. So domestic violence victims and support groups opposed the design, and the government actually made some changes to make it possible for those victims to actually receive money. So these are the sort of timelines and then how the government actually reacted to the pandemic. And just give you some more sort of local kind of what's actually happened at the local level. At the university, what happened was the first semester last year, all face-to-face classroom contacts were suspended. And then there was a sudden change to online teaching. So we had a couple of weeks or 3 weeks break, and then we prepared for the change, and then we started the online teaching. And second semester of 2020 and first semester of this academic year, we continue online teaching, but we also resumed some limited number of small group contacts in a classroom, like workshops and so on. And the second semester this year, we continue this arrangement, but there is an increased number of small group contacts, and at the moment we are considering the option or the arrangements for the next year. But my gut feeling is that the restrictions actually will be eased in some ways if the current sort of COVID-19 sort of situation or the circumstances hasn't changed in a negative way drastically in the next 6 months. So what does the declaration mean for the people? So as I said, the government actually can't order to the people, but they can request, or the government can request to refrain from non-essential outings, encourage to work from home, or to apply flexible working hours, or avoid non-essential traveling. So it differs from lockdown, but it right now puts some restrictions on people's movements, and then refrain from attending public events and then gatherings. So in essence, it's really restrictions on people's daily activities, and what really happened, particularly under the first time declaration, was a confinement within households for kids because schools are closed, and then for adults as well, because lots of workplaces are closed, or they applied the work from home arrangements, or they apply flexible working hours. So they actually spend shorter hours at office or limited number of days in the office, and then spend more time at home. And then the increased violence in the various forms. So that's my sort of understanding of the situation. And thirdly, I now move on to the issue of COVID-19 pandemic and then domestic violence. I put together some stats to give you a bit of idea of what's been happening. So let me share some stats now. This figure shows domestic violence reported cases in 2019 and 2020 in Japan. And so these figures gathered based on the number of phone calls and then contacts made with partner violence helpline, which covers across the nation. And pink bar here is 2019, and blue bar here is 2020. And so if you actually look at April, so April 2019, the number is 9,329. So these are the cases. And in 2020, the number actually jumped to 14, close to 15,000 altogether. So if you look at, if you just quickly look at those bars, you can sort of you can see that each month, the number of cases reported to the line increased from 2019 to 2020. So there is a clear sort of increase in the number of domestic violence reported cases in Japan. The next figure is the sex offense and sexual assault reported cases in 2019 and 2020. These numbers are also gathered based on the phone calls and then the in-person contacts made with helpline. It's a different helpline set up for the sex offense and then sexual assault incidents. And make a comparison between 2019, so the pink bar is 2019, and then these blue checkered bar shows 2020. And in total, as you can see, so it's 41,000 in 2019. It jumped to 51,000 in 2020. So the numbers increased by about 20%. So that's the sex offense and then sexual assault reported cases in Japan. And the last figure is in relation to suicide victims. So it's compared with the year earlier period. So it's a little bit complicated, but it shows differences in the numbers of people who committed suicide each month in 2019 and 2020. So, and yellow bar shows female, and green checkered bar is male. And so how you actually see this is that, say, for example, the number of suicide victims like July in 2020, so it's, which is here. So you can see the, July 2020, the female suicide victims increased by 103, and male victims decreased by 31. So, and from August onwards, almost each month, except like January this year, each month, there are more people who committed to suicide in general compared to last year. And what I actually would like to point out here is that, as you can see, the yellow bars, so women, female, committed suicide, like more women committed actually suicide. So it's actually affected women more. Of course, there is no evidence to actually show there is a causal relationship between those changes in the numbers and COVID-19. But so it's only the hypothesis. But it seems like many forms of violence, the figures related to many forms of violence actually has changed during a COVID-19 pandemic in Japan. And these changes are observed worldwide as well. So this is a UN Women website. It says violence against women during COVID-19 is the shadow pandemic. And when you look at their website, the first facts says that like globally, even before the COVID-19 pandemic began, the 1 in 3 women experienced physical or sexual violence, mostly by an intimate partner. And emerging data shows an increase in calls to domestic violence helplines in many countries since the outbreak of the COVID-19. And this applies to Japan. So Japan experiences similar tendencies like other countries, other countries in the world. The third point is sexual harassment and other forms of violence against women continue to occur on streets, in public spaces, and online. And survivors have limited information and awareness about available services and limited access to support services. In my opinion, this fourth point is applicable to Japan as well. And although the government is actually trying to do their best to actually respond to the situation, but we actually do have a quite serious situation of the domestic violence during the pandemic. The next slide is actually talking about, and this is just my thoughts, so it's really rough, and I actually wouldn't say this is really like, thought through or thorough in analysis, but it's tentative kind of like, the theory explaining why these like, increase in the violence is happening in Japan. I just called it the aggravation of underlying vulnerability. So what this means is that, so I believe there is an underlying issues people actually experiencing like, well before the pandemic actually started. So those underlying issues are divided into the two kind of tiers. And first tier is, first one is like, the personal, like relationship issues, parenting difficulties, pre-existing health conditions like physical health or the mental health, interpersonal skills or a lack of the one, or impulse control, addictions, and so on. So that's the first tier of underlying issues. And underneath of those personal, like the issues, there is a second tier, which is more like social issues, which is like a gender equality in the Japanese society in general, or social exclusion people actually experiencing, or the unstable employment, or multi-generational poverty, etc. And so there's this underlying issues, and these underlying issues came under pressure caused by the pandemic. So those pressures are like fear for infection, loss of income, confinement at home because of like kids actually can't go to school, or they have a shorter hours at school, or the parents are staying at home longer hours because they are working from home, or they are laid off, so they really needed to stay at home. So that's a confinement aspect. And also loss of financial prospect is a big one. And also alcohol. Alcohol consumption during the COVID-19 pandemic. I actually read the article analyzing the alcohol consumption during the pandemic, and both news articles and the academic journal articles. And some news articles actually talking about, it's anecdotal, but they're actually talking about the increase in alcohol consumption at home during the pandemic. And there are like basically two reasons behind that. The first one is lots of people are working from home, and it's easy to start drinking earlier on the day. And also some people, it's actually easy to drink while they are working from home. Because if you are working from home, you actually don't have a physical contact with your colleagues or the people who are coming to the meeting. So even you actually consume alcohol, people actually can't smell. And even your, like, if your face is a little bit flashing, right, you can actually always use the lightings, or you can actually turn off the lightings to actually make your face really dark. So it's quite easy to disguise your alcohol consumption even while you are working. And also another factor is, you could not go out for drink. So you really actually don't have any other choice but like stay home and then drink. And then you don't have to go, you don't have to go home. So you can really drunk and then smashed. And then, just lie on the couch, or, even on the floor, like, you wouldn't be picked up by the police because everything is happening inside of the household. So my theory is that while all of these changes actually happen, and most of those incidents actually happened inside people's homes, and because it's really enclosed and it's very hard for other people to actually see it, it actually wouldn't come out as a, the big public issue. But because those people who actually do have a contact with those helplines, because they actually did have those underlying issues or the underlying vulnerabilities, it's actually easier for them to actually come up to the surface, and then they're to be seen by the public. So in order to actually conclude this talk, I just talk about a little bit bright side of the issue. So service responses. And first of all, the service response by the government. The government actually acted very quickly in this area, and April last year, they extended the domestic violence helpline services, and now it's called Domestic Violence Helpline Plus. And now they have 24-hour, like 24/7, like 7 days a week operation of service, and they also extend their service to social networking sites, emails, so people can chat or send an email, and which is very helpful for some people, because in many cases, victims are actually staying at home with perpetrators. So it's very hard for them to actually pick up the phone and then talk. So that's that's a plus. And then the third point is the foreign languages, like 8 languages, including English, Chinese, Thai, Tagalog Filipinos. And those languages are now used for the services. People can be interviewed via internet if they wish to. They do also provide outreach support services and emergency accommodation. So government actually put quite large amount of funding to expand the existing services for the people. Also, the community service organizations are doing some, making some efforts as well. And today, I'd like to show you two examples. One is the kids restaurants, what we call Kodomo Shokudo. That literally means the kids restaurants. And this, it's a really community-based activities done by, like, ordinary people in the community who have a strong interest in the children's welfare. They get together and then prepare food. Then give away the food for free for the kids who are in the like financial hardship, or whose parents actually experiences a financial hardship and they can't provide the food sometimes to those people. And this movement is now sort of like expanded quite widely, and it actually covers across Japan. So there are many, many small community groups like in Yamaguchi, in Osaka, around my place. Yeah, there are many groups who's actually doing that. But because of the pandemic, people actually can't get together, so they can't actually come to the restaurant to eat. So what they actually started doing is they actually started preparing the bento lunch boxes for the kids and then distributing those lunch boxes to the kids, or sometimes to the parents as well. So in that way, they can actually control the infectious situation as well. The second example is the mobile cafe for young girls. This is also done by the community service organizations in Tokyo. I have a bit of contact with that organization, so I happen to have the information of that organization. So I'm talking about this, but I'm pretty sure that there are many other organizations who's actually doing similar supports. Just give you a bit of idea. So this is a photos from that. So the left-hand side photo is what it used to be. And this is a photo, I just took this photo from the internet. So this is the Kodomo Shokudo done in a Buddhist temple. As you can see, quite many people actually gathered, and then they prepare the food and they eat together. And now they actually changed that into the right-hand side photos, right-hand photo, like preparing a bento lunch boxes and then give it away to the kids or the family members. And the last one is the mobile cafe for young girls. So this is one in Tokyo. The bus is painted in pink color, so it stands out even in the middle of the night in a very busy streets in Tokyo. And what they do is they actually they prepare the chairs and tables, and then they provide some coffees or foods or finger foods, and most importantly, they do provide the power outlets for the mobile phone. They actually tried many things, and most effective way to actually to get the young girls come in is actually make a space for the makeup, and also they provide electricity for charging a mobile phone, because that's the only way for those girls to actually get in touch with other people in streets. So that's the end of my talk. So I hope this actually will give you a bit of the food for thoughts. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask, or the exchange your ideas. That would be most welcome. So thank you.
Thank you very much. During your speech, we had a few people join us. A lot of them, I have their cameras off because they are people who are working in the offices. So they're probably having to work and listen at the same time. So just to explain to the people who joined us later, but this is the end of the speech, and we will have about 15 or 20 minutes of discussion, comments, question times. So if you can turn your mic on and ask questions, that's great. But if it's difficult for you to do so, if you can put some comments or questions into the chat box, we can talk about them a little bit. So first of all, I'll open the floor to other people. If you have some comments or questions, please let us know. Turn your mic on and begin. Okay, if no one's going to raise their hand quickly, then I have a few things. And while I'm talking, maybe other people will have some as well. First of all, at the beginning of your speech, you were talking about both domestic violence and family violence. And you said that you were going to refer to both because you said that there are other forms of violence. And I'd never heard the term family violence. And I was wondering how DV and family violence, FV, I don't know if you say that, how are they different? Can you tell us?
Okay, I'm not, okay, because it's well, I was a bit nervous, and then I really totally skipped that topic of family violence, or forgot mentioning about the family violence. I'm not too sure about the situation in US, but in Australia, there is a tendency or the shift of the use of the terminology from domestic violence to family violence. And it's because that the term domestic violence almost implies that the issue is really domestic. So it actually stays at home, managed within the household. So it's not a public issue. It's really almost implying that there is a sense of shame to be heard or shared in a community. So the government actually made a very conscious decision to change the terminology to the family violence. So it's not domestic anymore. It's the issue of the family. It's a violence within a family unit, which should be shared in a community, and this is everybody's problem. So that's a change of the terminology in Australia. And
in Australia.
Yeah, in Australia. And when that change actually happened, what also happened was that the people's perception about the violence actually broadened as well. So now people actually make a connection between the domestic violence and then child abuse and neglect, and also the lots of issues related to the families, like parenting issues, partnership difficulties, and all of those people, all of those issues are actually became more interrelated.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a change of the terminology, and today I didn't have enough time, so I didn't cover the issue of child abuse. There's interesting findings about the child abuse during the pandemic in Japan. The number of reports of the child abuse actually hasn't increased that drastically in these 2 years. But the total number of calls or consultation with the government services is still on rise. So the number is actually increasing, but it's actually not that apparent as we actually saw on the figures in relation to the domestic violence or sex offense or sexual assault or suicide.
That's interesting to know. And you're right. When I think of DV, I kind of automatically think of spousal violence, whereas DV and child abuse can all be kind of put together under the term family violence. So that's interesting to know. Can Stephanie or Mari, can you talk at all about Hawaii? Do they have some sort of distinction between DV and family violence, or is there any change in terminology happening there?
Maybe Mari can share.
Sure, Stephanie wanted to talk. But not that I am aware of at this point. There isn't any distinction between the two. I mean, there is talk though about the family unit, and also more of an increase in awareness that domestic violence isn't a women's issue, because there's so many women that are activists, and bringing in the men now, that's been a big movement and shift. So we've hosted and partnered on campus with other community service groups, a men's march against domestic violence, an annual march rally. So sign waving is a Hawaii thing, right? Where the political signs protests. So we got the prosecutors, our local prosecutor office, all men, women, families are welcome, but trying to empower the men to have a voice to speak to other men of that domestic violence. It is a men's issue too, as much as it is a women's or family's issue. And peace begins with you. Like, that's the message.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because kind of similar change is actually happening in Japan as well. It used to be, people actually used to think that the domestic violence response to the domestic violence is to basically make a way for the women to escape from that relationship. So it's really like, for women to actually make a move and then get out from that abusive relationship. Whereas nowadays, there are more talk about the treatment for the perpetrators or the offenders. So it's really the men's issue, and men actually needs to, it's not just like needs to be treated. It's actually it's really the, provide support services for them as well. And I have a very close friend and colleague who's conducting a workshop for the perpetrators of domestic violence in Osaka. And he actually often says that those perpetrators they actually feel that they are under a huge pressure during this pandemic, because often they have a very masculine sort of way of thinking, and then believe that they actually has to be a breadwinner for the whole household. And then because of the pandemic, they sometimes lose their job, or their income actually sort of decreased in a very drastic way. And then I really can't support my family. And so that actually sort of put extra pressure on those men. And then often they are quite fragile in a way. And one of the way to actually respond to that pressure is to actually try to control. And often that control actually directed towards the kind of physically weaker household members.
I'm not a professional, and so I really don't know anything about DV. I haven't studied it at all, but my impression is that I think one of the causes for that happening is that, as you said, the men don't know how to deal with stress. And I think some of that could be not having a good father figure or a mentor in their life. So Mari-san talked about having the men against DV, those kind of walks and that type of volunteering would be so important, because they need to know and learn how to be able to channel their stress and their aggression in non-violent ways, how to, you know, get the aggressive feelings to subside and that type of thing. So I think having those kind of education type of things are really important. So yeah.
Yeah. So it's actually interesting to actually talk to perpetrators sometimes, because often they actually say, and I think they believe as well, they are doing the right thing. They are forced to behave in that way by the situation or by the other family members. That's what they say. And often they were treated like that when they are kids. So, you know, father needs to be strong and then directive, and then sort of like, you know, keep a order within the household. So that kind of belief is very strong. You know, it's a very general, you know, it's a generalization, but yeah, generally speaking, that's in the case, in many cases.
And one other thing that I wanted to ask you, if it's possible, can you show the slide towards the end where you were showing all of the different underlying issues, the personal ones, the social ones, and the COVID issues that all make it up? And then I wanted to ask Stephanie or Mari-san to look at that slide and see, you know, what's happening in Hawaii as well. You know, has there been an increase in domestic violence? And are those issues that he's brought up, which of those issues are the ones that have been the most problematic in Maui? This one, yeah, when it had, yeah, all of those. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So you talked about all of these as things happening in Japan, and you specifically mentioned the alcohol issue, and I imagine there's the employment issue was very big because so many stores closed and drinking establishments or restaurants closed and that type of thing. How about Maui or Hawaii? Which of these things stood out to you, and have you seen an increase in DV there as well?
I was just reading, or actually watching the 6 o'clock news, and there was a report from the Honolulu Police Department where they're experiencing a high volume of calls regarding domestic violence. And Hawaii has, during this pandemic, has experienced an increase. I don't know exactly what the statistics are, but 13% of the general adult population of Hawaii report that, you know, intimate partner violence was higher in the female population than in males. So basically what we're seeing in the public eye is that partners are experiencing stress because of like being laid off, or they own business together, or their children at home. All these underlying themes that you have here happen in Hawaii as well. Wearing my other hat, remarkably, I haven't thought about this for 20 years or so, but I am a social worker by training, and I was the executive director for a child abuse and neglect organization here on Maui, where we did study the relationships of, like you said, the dominant or stronger figure, parenting figure in a household, whether they were married or not. The family unit was always, like you said, controlled by the stronger partner. So in my organization, I had couples and families in trouble. And this is the important thing about Hawaii. We tend to approach things from a family standpoint. We use the word ohana, which means family. And pretty much everything we do, we're a community of families. So this is not new to us. And then, of course, my husband is a family lawyer, and I deal with, just today, a phone call from a woman experiencing tremendous pressure and domestic verbal abuse from her partner. So I can see that the pandemic has catapulted the things that have normally happened to a higher degree in Hawaii. But one of the things that causes it is the unstable unemployment situation and the kids at school, and then lack of housing. We don't have alcohol problems as much as, you know, Japan does, because I know Japan people love drinking, so do I, but that has not affected us as much as the lack of an affordable place to live. While they lost their jobs, they also lost their homes. And so this is another aspect which is not on your list, but for Hawaii, it would be a lack of an affordable and safe place for their families. Maybe Mari has more because she's from the university side and sees and hears this on a daily basis.
That all sounds about right. Just the displacement of homes, lots of rent. It's so expensive living here. So a lot of folks can only afford renting, but the market has just, I mean, gone up. That even landlords are putting their homes up for sale, and so they're that family, and of course families live with family of multiple generations in order to just afford to continue to live at their home that they've lived for generations. So it is definitely the housing is an ongoing issue right now. That's a priority for affordable housing. Definitely. I think in the beginning of COVID, yeah, the alcohol consumption went up. That's from what I've learned. Depression along with that, and the intimate partner violence, I would also echo that too, because I mean, the whole family is having to just face each other for the first time. Even partners, usually they're working, they when they come home, okay, if they come home at the same time, oftentimes parents are working different shifts just to take care of the children. So some work at night, so during the day. So anyway, they with everyone at home, they had to face each other, and the tension, just there's too much tension. Everybody needs their space, but there's such a small space. So that definitely added to the underlying issues of more fighting or discord at home. And if I could ask another question though, to Asa, that about the culture, because I maybe you've touched on it. I was out and about, but just the cultural aspect of in Japan, like I'm half Japanese, half Chinese, but several generations born in Hawaii. So but I still have a little bit of the Asian. It's like you don't really talk. You don't want to talk about stuff. Going into clinical social work, that's what we're all about. Is like you talk about your issues and you work through it and you want to heal. So in Hawaii, there's so many cultures that we, of course, along with the Asian influence. So I wonder how that has an impact on the reported cases, or even just being able to seek help or be open to help or acknowledge that I need help. Can you speak about that?
Yeah, sure. Just in terms of the cultural aspect in relation to the domestic violence, I would say there is a very strong influence from the cultural sort of, it's almost the expectation on the family. So, but I must say, this actually has been and is changing quite drastically and quite rapidly. So, in my generation, I was born in 1970, and there was a bit of expectation on the family members to actually look after each other, and there are quite a number of families who lived with their parents. So it's a 3 generations like in a household, so grandparents and the parents and the children. But the number of this type of household has decreased dramatically, very rapidly. And now it's very hard to actually find people who are actually living in that arrangement. But still, like there is I think politically, there is a strong certain belief in the family system. And so the reason why I actually say this is that the Japan or the Japanese government actually still, they don't recognize the separate family name for the married couple. And when you actually look at the census, more than half of the population actually support introducing a new system so people actually can use the different family names, even they actually got married. But this actually hasn't eventuated because the very conservative part of the ruling party very strongly opposed to that idea. And then their reasons for opposition is the loss of family connection and the tie to the family. So what this actually says is that there is a kind of like, the belief among the people that the family is very important, and it's important because family members actually are supposed to look after each other, support each other when they are really in a difficult time. But the reality is that, well, you actually happen to be in a family member in one household, and you didn't really choose to be with that person. And if someone really, as you said, if someone actually experiencing a high degree of stress, and then they suddenly started seeing each other, spending a long time each other in a very confined space. I mean, I'm not justifying it, but I wouldn't be really, I'm not really surprised by looking those figures. It's almost like a natural response to the stress of the human beings. But I would say there is a very strong influence from the Asian culture. So it's the value in a family and expectation on the family members to actually look after each other, and also the gender inequality in Japanese society is actually partly coming from that cultural sort of belief. The man should be a breadwinner, should be strong, should be in control, and also in terms of seeking help. Yes, people tend not to talk about the domestic violence issue in public. People tend not to talk about even with their very close friends because it's shameful. It's like the saying, I'm inconfident or unable to deal with the situation. And also the opening up the personal issues with other people. And I think also there is a gender gap. Generally speaking, men tend not to talk at all. It's not just that the Asian culture. I think in Australia it's the same thing. Men really don't talk, and then they suddenly commit suicide, and then everybody really shocked. So that's a it's a kind of similar tendency. But yeah, I would say there is a very strong influence from the Japanese culture or Asian culture.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
So looking at these underlying vulnerabilities, so COVID aggravated these underlying vulnerabilities. And I found it very, very surprising that you said that the rate of child abuse did not seem to go up, even though COVID aggravated these underlying vulnerabilities. And of course, also with some schools closed, children were at home more. So I feel that warrant some kind of explanation. So I'm wondering if you have any ideas to possibly explain why domestic violence may have gone up, but not child abuse.
Okay. This is just my thoughts, so there's no evidence supporting that. But when you actually look at the sources of child abuse report to the support services in last maybe 10, 15 years, there's a very clear tendency of increase of the report from the police and school. And it's because of the very strong public campaign and also the very strong directive from the chief police commissioner of Japan to all of the police headquarters across Japan. Now, if police officers actually go to the household and then if they actually see the adults fighting each other in front of the children, they automatically report that as a child abuse because it's an instance actually happened in front of the children. So it's a psychological abuse for the children. And this actually change happened some years ago. And then this change actually pushed a number of the reports from the police significantly. So now around half of the reports to the service organizations are actually from the police. And another big sort of proportion of the reports are actually from the school. And my hypothesis is that while all of those things actually happened at home, maybe number of the domestic violence instance reports to the police may increase, but because children didn't go to school for quite extended period of time, it's actually not that long here in Yamaguchi. But if we actually look at the metropolitan areas like Osaka, like my kids actually stayed at home for more than 3 months and didn't go to school at all.
Wow.
And didn't have any contact from school at all, zero. I mean, that actually left kids in a very vulnerable position. I mean, that to start with, but at the same time, that actually basically lost the contact of school teachers with those kids. So school teachers actually, I think they actually didn't report because they actually didn't have any evidence. They didn't have any physical contact with kids.
So oftentimes the child abuse is identified by the teachers at school. I got it.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
So in your hypothesis, you actually think that child abuse might have actually gone up, but we just couldn't follow it, possibly. Okay.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Okay,
also
and
another,
then
yeah.
I wanted to ask one other thing to try to bring things to a little bit lighter at the end of our talk.
Yeah.
Your very last slide, you showed the bus, the Tsubomi Cafe for young girls,
Yeah.
and you talked about it a little bit, and I thought it was very interesting. I was just wondering, why was it necessary to make these cafes? It's very cute and very Japanesey. Is it to help the girls who've run away from home, or is it specifically for girls who've been abused? Like what is this? Can you explain it a little bit more?
Yeah, okay. The organization who's actually doing this mobile cafe is actually providing a support for the particularly young girls who run away from home, and then basically the hangouts in the like the busy streets in the metropolitan area. And very similar organization is actually doing a similar activity in Osaka and Kyoto, I think. And the reason behind that is that the person who started this organization actually had the same experience. She ran away from home. She couldn't stay at home. Her family wasn't in poverty, but because of the family violence and the relationship issue, she couldn't stay. And so she ran away. But when she actually ran away from home, of course, she couldn't go to school. If young person actually don't go to school and then don't go back don't go back home. I mean, where else could you go? And what she actually explained is that that almost always for young girls, it's a straight pipeline for the prostitution and crime on the streets, and often the drug use related to that. So she thought it's very important for young girls to actually to have a place to go. And she said, based on her experience, the public service is very hard for young girls to approach because it's too formal and they are too basically too intrusive in a way. So she started the office, and then she started outreach support. And when they started outreach support, what they actually found is that it's hard. Well, it's easy to pick up those young girls and then talk, but it's very hard to engage with those young girls. So often they actually change the SNS, and then start exchanging the chats, and then the kind of encourage them to actually talk on the phone, and then and then encourage them to actually have a face-to-face contact. So it's a very lengthy process, and often it's not really successful. So she thought it's then how about to actually make a place, very standing out, and it's very easy to find out, and then this bus actually goes around the several central parts of the Tokyo and Yokohama, and then the girls actually started talking. So yeah, that's the story behind this activity.
It's a fantastic idea, and doing things like letting them recharge their phones.
Yep.
And also doing makeup type of stuff. It's really good for bringing them in and letting them contact each other, which is almost as important as being in touch with the social services. If they can be in touch with each other, they can be giving advice and supporting and helping and that type of thing. So it's a really nice idea. It should be started also for young boys as well. I don't know how you bring in young boys into a cafe, but even just recharging batteries, I think, is important. So, okay, so it's about I don't know if you all heard our chimes on this end. So the one class ended and we're in the break time before the next class. So I think it's about time to wrap it up. Mizutani Sensei, can you just say hello? This is the head of our department, and she joined towards the end, but if you could just say hello.
Sashiburi, how are you?
So she's been working with Maeda Sensei on that and with fashion and that type of thing.
Yes.
Between Maui and Hawaii, and I hope that we can continue to work on
I hope so. Our students at UH Maui College really look forward to that Global Fashion Network workshop and the indigo dyeing and everything. But I do know that Mari and I work with students, and just by participating today, it reminded me that the students you send to us are mostly 90% from Japan. And the cultural aspect is very predominant. The boys do the talking, the girls kind of do the listening and the following. And I did take them this week on an art walk. We did all the murals in Wailuku. And as we were walking through town, one of the boys said in Nihongo, "Oh, my father lost his job." And there was a little question if I could come to this study abroad. And so the discussion did turn to COVID between the students. And I was thinking to myself, oh, this is something that they're opening up to each other, but not to us, because they're speaking in their native tongue. And I'm wondering, maybe we can do academic counseling and also just personal counseling. I love the idea of the pink bus, but there's not enough resources here to do that. We could do pink and blue bus, something like that for the boys and girls. But there is a need, I think, to do more talking and opening up and expressing some of the fears they have of, like you said, not being adequate. I asked one of the students to volunteer tomorrow to our international meet and greet, and all of them said, no, we can't. And I said, why can't you? Oh, no, our English is bad. We can't. One boy stood up and said, I can. And I said, oh my God. And he said, I'm a leader. And okay, so this is unique coming from Japan. And so this is who they all follow. And so I'm going to have to channel the leadership. But I think that maybe Mari and I can come up with some ideas to work with our international student body on campus and be more prepared when we do have situations that arise, like your student last year. I think our counselors got right to work, and we were amazed at the outcomes, but she wasn't unique. We have problems like this time to time, but I really want to thank everyone for showing us these stats. I did send you by email Hawaii stats, a little old, last year's, but the domestic violence is not at the top of our mind because basically Hawaii is very Asian. Like Mari said, we're very Japanese. We don't talk about it. And when other cultures explode and have these issues, we all act like, oh, we don't know anything about it, but yet it happens to every family. You know? So we'd probably like to get back, circle back with you in a couple of months before the next semester to see if we can come up with a follow-up webinar on the situation in Japan and in Hawaii and what we're doing on our campus. Does that sound like a good plan?
Yeah, that sounds great. I just put up the PowerPoint that Professor Mizuto used today. So you can use it and show people the pink bus.
Oh yeah, I wanted to see all the pictures I could, I was thinking, where did he go to get those pink buckets? Where did they go? To Daiso or someplace? They're adorable.
So thank you. It's 10:30. I want to thank everyone for joining today. And Stephanie and Mizuto Sensei and Kakoi-san, if you can hang on a couple minutes. But we thank you very much. Small numbers, but I think we were able to share a lot, and that's good. So I hope we can continue to do these kind of things as well.
Yes. Thank you all. Thank you all. Any last words from Mari or anyone from the UH side? I know Li Ping had to go to another webinar. We're so busy.
Well, just thank you so much for sharing. Very encouraged, and hope we can continue to just work together, keep doing what you folks do, and I mean, just thankful, grateful for each of you, and it's, I think as we each do what we can, it'll make a difference. So take care too, self-care, encourage you to take care of yourself.
Thank you.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you, Mari.
Bye.
Okay. Thank you so much. See you again.
See ya.
Bye.